Before the outbreak of the COVID-19 last year, Kenyans living abroad were engaged in a very robust debate on social media on where a majority of them, having spent most of their adult life abroad, will want to retire. Kenya or their country of sojourn. Part of that debate took place in December in New Jersey, and this is that story. Welcome. Before the outbreak of the coronavirus late last year, the Kenyan community abroad was engaged in a very robust debate on social media on where a majority of them, having spent half or more of their adult life abroad, will want to finally retire. Kenya or their country of sojourn. One of those discussions had in fact directly led to this meeting here today, dubbed Wazee Kumbuka at Msemika's Place in New Brunswick, New Jersey. One of the architects of this get-together is Benson Wandabwa, a Kenyan-born resident of Middletown in New Jersey.
Yeah, it was an idea that came out of a conversation I had with Mr. John Wafula, who unfortunately could not make it today. Something he just came up with and said, listen, why don't we, the old crowd that used to meet, there's a very small place called Henry's Walk. We'll meet there in weekends or after work, and we'll just meet there and have a conversation, have a couple of drinks. And he said, we are now all scattered all over the place. Why don't we find a place where we all can meet and just reminisce of our experiences? And some of our children, they don't know where, we don't know where our children are. Kind of touch base and just see if we can talk and kind of like share our experiences as we all have scattered all over the place. I mean, we have people in Pennsylvania, we have people in Massachusetts, we have people all over the place. Why don't we just meet and have a conversation? And this is how, and the way we came to Mika during that part of the conversation, Mika, we know him for a long time. Mika said, yeah, I'll host it. So this is how this came to fruition.
These people here may have come to the US at different periods of time and for different reasons. And just like almost all of these men, Benson came to the US as a postgraduate student through an offhand suggestion from an American scholar that would later completely change the course of Benson's life.
I mean, without having to be political, when we finished Nairobi University, we were part of that group that went through those rough days during Moi's regime. And most of us who came from what you could pretty much call like fringe groups, the Bukusus, I mean, being a proud Bukusu, and we were not treated right. We were not offered any jobs, government jobs like we were supposed to have at the time. And that pretty much informed my decision that Kenya wasn't really accepting me as a professional, and that's when I started looking for ways to get out of the country. And it was a happenstance. As a matter of fact, I was working for an NGO in Kakamega, and my boss told me that we have a guest from the US that I want you to entertain or take him around, show him the projects you're working on. It turned out that he was actually a professor of history, and he was also the director of international studies at Ohio University. So during those conversations, he says to me, I guess you could say I impressed him enough. My level of intellect, he says to me, why don't you come to the US to study? And I said, are you serious? He said, yes. Then he gives me his card. Professor Gifford Doxey, now late, died 2 years ago. A Second World War veteran, very good man. So I applied, and I got a scholarship, a tuition scholarship to come to the US. And all I had to do was raise enough money to buy my tickets.
The straight line that connects most Kenyans you currently find in the US, especially those who came here post the 1960s airlift, is the desire to look for greener pastures owing to the challenging socio-political and economic times prevailing in the country during the 80s and 90s.
When I finished graduate school, I had the desire to go home. In fact, I had bought a car, I shipped it home, but when I went to Kenya, I stayed there. The little savings I had got finished after 3 months. It was hard to get a job. I was interviews here and there at the university, the government, promises, until I got fed up and came back. When I came back, I sent out 10 resumes. I was called to 5 interviews. I was given 3 offers, and I selected one, a teaching job at Essex, where I taught for 32 years. I just retired. So the thing was that I was able to come here and be able to be productive compared to Kenya. It was whom you know. Here, you have the papers. At that time, you get the papers, you present them, you're qualified, they hire you.
And even though Benson and his compatriots have built a beautiful life abroad, they also acknowledge that life abroad is not the proverbial bed of roses for majority of migrants, among them Kenyans.
They have. I mean, if you think about the new policies being enacted by executive orders, where there's no longer, first of all, scholarships have almost dried out. Education here has become very expensive. Some of us were very lucky to have been the last, I guess you could say almost the last breed of people who came here and took advantage of the education opportunities. Now those have been affected by the cutbacks in education, especially universities. Also the changes in the immigration laws have become much more stricter. You could come here back then, and if you finish school here, you would get a job, and the job would sponsor you for a green card, and eventually work your way up to become a citizen. Now, I became a citizen because of marriage, but that I'm informed that this is probably going to have to change also. So really, relocating to the U.S. is not going to be any easier if the process put in place by the current government goes into effect, which is in 2 months from now.
Yeah.
Well, the green cards, we have had for the longest time. I can't remember exactly how long this has been in place, but there have been open enrollment where people in the third world countries, there was a certain sense of proportionality, and I think the U.S. had a policy where they would, either to fulfill their labor requirements, would offer people to apply for green cards, and then they would apply, and of course they would be vetted, and once you get vetted, depending on what your credentials, what you would bring to the U.S., you would be admitted, and that has been in place for a long time. The second option was you get a scholarship, you come here on an F1 visa, and then you go to college, you finish school. 2 options: you either fall in love and marry an American, or you get a job and the job sponsors you for a green card through an H1 visa system, eventually get a green card. But that seems to me at peril right now. It's probably one of the, if you look at the current administration and why they are phasing out some of these programs, it's very disheartening to say the least, because it means like I can't even, if my mother was alive today and she was sick, I cannot bring her here, which is mind-boggling.
Socioeconomic challenges have only continued to increase, especially during the Trump administration and its hostility towards migrants.
Again, it's economic, I would say. Economic and cultural changes. Economic in the sense that if you can't get a job to be able to survive, it's hard to raise your children, to be able to take them to school, etc., etc. and that's quite a challenge. I don't know whether Kenya is better, but that's at the moment in the prevailing conditions in this country, that's a big challenge.
Now you almost have you almost have to look at the timelines. So, for example, the generations that came before me, they also struggled hard. Now, for me, my generation, when we came here, the challenges were that you went to school pretty much non-stop, and when you graduated, you started hustling to find a job. Some of us were holding 2-3 jobs at the same time at some point. And when eventually you settle down to one industry that will hire you because you have a certain sense of expertise in that area, then you target that area, and then we all started moving away from each other. So as a matter of fact, the idea of having this gathering today was, people have so moved away from each other, and we wanted to see how we all can meet together and kind of reminisce and kind of touch base and say, listen, we're all here. Some of us are looking at, maybe a few years from now, we will be looking to retirement. Now, we can share ideas on what retirement will look like. We are at Mika's house. Mika just retired not too long ago. He's probably a good resource in how we will experience retirement, how we'll experience how we handle ourselves in retirement, because I think it can be a tough world when you've been working all these years. You knew where you woke up in the morning and went, and you knew when you got home. Now you wake up in the morning and you have your cup of coffee and you wonder what you're going to do for the rest of the day. So that is a challenge. That has to be a challenge, and we want to be able to prepare ourselves. Some people have prepared themselves by saying that they probably move back to where we came from, Africa or wherever we came from. But that's also a challenge because our attitudes, our belief system has also been altered. You want services, you want them now, but some of the places we come from, it's kind of difficult because people tend to be sluggish. It can be very frustrating.
In many ways, this reality has continued to haunt Kenyans living abroad, and that's the reason you find many of them living in two worlds. One they currently have abroad, and the other, the one that they left home decades ago.
As a matter of fact, I'll point you to one. I was interviewed in probably 1987/88. I arrived in this country in 1987, September 2nd, and I was privileged to have had an interview with one local papers in Ohio, and they asked me what my plans were. I said, I want to have an education and go to Kenya. But obviously that didn't happen. Now I can visit Kenya as a tourist. But those are the challenges that we have. But as we get older and our children, we are now pretty much empty nesters. You think about it, yes, some of us still have properties in Kenya, and one of my plans would be, how hard is it for me to be here 6 months out of a year and 6 months in Kenya once I retire? That's my plan.
Awesome. Most Kenyans abroad have worked hard in part to invest at home for either commercial purposes or in preparation for retirement that never seem to come. Many have bought plots or even large tracts of land that currently lie fallow. They have built mansions in rural areas that they sleep in 2 or 3 weeks in a year, and of course many are still engaged in local development groups and political societies.
And nobody tells you this, but I know for a fact that my attitudes have changed over time. I've been 30 plus years over here. My attitudes have changed about what I need, what my needs are. I don't want to go to a bank and wait for half an hour. I don't want to do that. I don't want to look for, government services and wait for a month. I don't have a month to waste. That time is important to me. So those are the challenges when you go to Kenya and you apply for something. Just a passport, or you're applying for some new service that has come up. I'm told Huduma number. I don't even know what Huduma number means. They are now switching our passports to e-passports. Those challenges are real, and we get as people who have lived overseas and experienced quick service. It's very hard to transport the same attitudes to Kenya and expect the same kind of service level as we do here. So that is a major challenge for most of us. Even when I move to Kenya, if and when I do, and how soon, that's going to be a challenge. I just don't have the time to stay in a line forever when I can have services much quicker. That is the main challenge. Now also, of course, the attitudes that you're from America, they think you have money. No, we do not have money. We work for a living. We work hard. Some of us have held 2-3 jobs, and sometimes when you go to Kenya, they just think that you have money. Your aunts, your uncles arrive, and they are looking for money. They want handouts here and there. It's just hard. It's not how we live in America. No, it's not. That is a serious challenge for most of us.
And so, as the evening full of nostalgic melancholy wears off, and the drink and song composed decades ago in another life, another country takes hold, these folks right here are each probably wondering whether their final resting home will be here in the land of their sojourn or back in Kenya in what used to be called Western Province. As these people remains, little do they know that in a matter of months, a pandemic that will soon turn the world on its head was brewing thousands of miles away in China, in some village called Wuhan. That does it for us today. We hope that you enjoyed the show. Join us again next week as we bring you more stories from the diaspora. Please remember that you can engage us on social media on Facebook, or you can even write to us at Diaspora Life Show at standardmedia.co.ke. I'll see you again next week.